But when I have something important to say, I want my stomach empty, but my brain full.
Over the course of 40 years, Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas starred side by side in over 7 films. But did they truly like each other? Tales of their friendship on and off the screen captivated many supporters, but the truth of the matter just might be a little different, because in reality, this duo was extremely competitive and allegedly didn't even like each other. How true is this? Let's find out. Burt Lancaster's temper. Ever wondered what it must have been like to work with one of the greatest actors of his generation? If you're thinking it must have been all sunshine and roses, Burt Lancaster just might prove you wrong. For all his talents on and off the screen, the man was reportedly very volatile and violent, and was feared and loathed by many top filmmakers. Now it's one thing to be feared, but it's something completely different to be loathed. You could be feared for being strict, but for several people to outrightly state that they hated you, there must have been something you were doing wrong. So, what exactly did Burt do wrong to get the entire film industry irritated with him? There wasn't exactly anything specific that the man did to get on people's nerves. He usually just had creative differences, or his boisterous personality would put the other off. Take, for example, John Huston, who directed him in the 1960 Western The Unforgiven. They had an infamous feud that allegedly began over creative differences and clashes of personality. The dispute between them was so bitter that John ended up taking revenge when he found out his nemesis was co-sponsoring a celebrity golf tournament. He had hired a small plane and had thousands of ping pong balls, scrawled with insults such as "Burt Lancaster sucks," dropped on the course. Unfortunately, the tournament had to be abandoned, but at least John had gotten his sweet revenge. Interestingly, John wasn't the only one vying for Burt's head. Several others in the industry also had a bunch of mean names to hurl at him. But why did he make so many enemies of his co-workers? To better understand Burt and his persona, we'd have to travel back to the slums of the East Harlem area in 1913. Burt was born in a slum known as Little Italy on November 2nd of 1913. His father was a postal clerk, and he might have gotten his fierceness from his mother Lizzie, who once savagely whooped her young child for not coming back home from a grocery store with the correct change. Unsurprisingly, Burt grew up to be rather fierce himself. Back in high school, there were reports that he got into a knife fight and spent several months recuperating from the wound. Barry himself has admitted he was a punk kid who would have grown up to be a criminal, save for the existence of athletics and the public library, where he was able to read books from greats like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. What made Burt all the more menacing was his physique that simply towered over others. By the time he was 14, Burt was already 6 feet 2 inches tall. Thanks to his height, he developed a love for basketball and excelled at it. However, he rejected a scholarship to play the sport at New York University. His reason? He wanted to become an acrobat at the K Brothers Circus. For the few moments of his life that he spent as an acrobat, Burt admitted that it was a great life. Although he rarely talked about his brief marriage to a teenage acrobat, June Ernst, whom he had tied the knot with in a shotgun wedding. As the years rolled by, Burt found himself leaning towards a career in the spotlight. Soon enough, he was making his Hollywood debut, and his rise to fame was imminent. One would imagine that a fairly new kid on the block might be a bit more docile and eager to learn from superiors. But this wasn't Burt's reality, and he couldn't for the life of him fake it. This was why even in his Hollywood debut, he earned a reputation as a difficult actor. Soon, word around the block was, that kid has made one picture and already he knows more than anyone on the lot. This reputation would stay with Burt over his next 75 movies, in a career that spanned nearly 45 years. However, even with his personality and his penchant for arguing with directors and his castmates, Burt was still the hottest kid on the block for several reasons. First of all, his screen presence was unmatched, and his versatility made him one of the most captivating actors of his time. It's why he could go from playing the sleazy gossip columnist J.J. Hunsaker in Sweet Smell of Success to embodying the grandeur of a 19th century Sicilian prince in The Leopard. Burt's performances were also as varied as they were compelling. His role as the lonely ornithologist in Birdman of Alcatraz earned him the Best Actor award at the 1962 Venice Film Festival, further cementing his acting prowess. Over the years, he brought to life a diverse range of characters, including a remorseful German war criminal, a caring cleric, and countless tough guys, cowboys, army sergeants, and even acrobats. Remarkably, Burt never received formal acting training, but was fearless in taking on roles that pushed boundaries. But just how much of his real-life personality did he inject into these characters? Was Burt mean in real life? Back in 1952, Burt showcased his raw talent by playing a middle-aged alcoholic chiropractor in Come Back, Little Sheba. One of the most intense moments of the film comes when his character loses control, lashing out at his long-suffering wife with a knife. The scene shocked the entire cast and crew the same way it surprised the audience, leaving a lasting impression that reflected Burt's ability to convey immense emotional power. But then again, his accurate portrayal had viewers wondering just how true to reality that lashing out aspect of him was. Well, the reality wasn't quite different from his on-screen intensity, and people soon began to take note of it. The first to notice were those who worked closely with him. They were quick to point out that his real-life persona was equally formidable. According to composer Elmer Bernstein, who worked with Burt on Sweet Smell of Success, he actually had a short fuse and a raw physicality that made him intimidating. In his words, Burt was really scary. You thought you might get punched out. Sidney Pollack, another director who worked with him, described him as a very intimidating man, and filmmaker Alexander McKendrick even admitted to feeling threatened by the actor's presence. But sometimes, the intimidation turned into something much more tangible. A notorious incident during the filming of The Professionals in 1966 saw Burt punch actor Jack Palance so hard that the Oscar winner ended up vomiting from the force of the blow. Not sure how one could make a comeback from that in today's circumstances, but somehow he didn't get canceled. Instead, his volatile temper didn't subside with age. In 1971, while filming Lawman, director Michael Winner and the crew witnessed Burt's outbursts firsthand. Michael recalled a particularly heated moment when Burt grabbed him, threatening to throw him off a mountain. Recalling how the giant of a man dragged him by the pelvis while yelling obscenities, Michael said, "He threatened to kill me twice." We're not sure what kind of altercation they might have gotten into, but it might not have been particularly bad, especially since despite these intense moments, Michael remained fond of Burt. It didn't mean they didn't have a tumultuous working relationship. But at least when Michael thought of him, he often described him as a dear friend and a wonderful man, despite the occasional violent outbursts. Speaking of, one of Burt's most infamous confrontations came in 1984 during the filming of Little Treasure in Mexico. At the time, Lancaster was 70 and still recovering from a recent heart bypass surgery. Health and age concerns aside, Burt found himself in a physical altercation with his 35-year-old co-star Margot Kidder, who had gained fame as Lois Lane in Superman. The cause of their physical quarrel? Margot, playing Burt's estranged daughter in the film, had wanted to take a scene in a direction that Burt disagreed with. When she argued back, Margot claimed Burt began physically attacking her, and since she wasn't one to back down, Margot threw hands as well, leading the two to exchange blows that left them both with bloody cuts. Later, Margot admitted to having thrown a harsh insult at Lancaster, calling him a washed-up old f in the heat of the moment. But the good thing, if you could call it that, about Burt and his temper was that he wasn't blind to his own flaws. In fact, he was remarkably self-aware, admitting, "I'm a pain in the neck. I try to direct pictures. I try to tell the other actors how to act. People hate me." His candidness about his shortcomings, paired with his undeniable talent and dedication to his craft, paints the picture of an actor who was both larger than life and deeply human, warts and all. And when it came time to meet co-star Kirk Douglas, Burt wasn't any different. In fact, he was so terrible that he made the former cry. An unlikely friendship. When you see photos of Kirk and Burt together, similar smiles on their faces as they posed for photos, you'd imagine that they were best of friends. After all, they'd gone as far as working together on several movies. So even if they weren't best friends, they could at least have been great co-workers. Well, the truth couldn't be much further than that. Kirk thought the same everyone thought of Burt. He was a pain to work with and had an extremely terrible personality. It's why sometimes it kind of looked as though they were more foes than friends, especially since they always felt like they had to compete with each other. Matter of fact, while presenting Kirk with an award, Burt would confess that his co-star was a very difficult man to work with, which was rich considering Burt's own reputation. Never one to shy away from a quip, he introduced Kirk at the event by saying, "Kirk would be the first to admit he is a difficult person. I would be the second." It almost felt as though Burt had finally met his match. It was what made this duo absolutely wonderful to watch on screen, as their push and pull dynamic felt so real, one would often wonder if they brought their off-screen personalities to the big screen. The truth was that they did. Burt and Kirk had cracked the code to working together, and before long, they determined that their dynamic relationship, which was equal parts camaraderie and conflict, should be translated to the screen. The directors listened, and the result is the stunning pieces of art that their joint movies are. These two slowly became two of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men, working together in 7 films and even a play. But despite their mutual respect and undeniable chemistry, their friendship was anything but smooth sailing. Although they would later become great friends later in life, the friction between this duo was evident from the get-go. Earlier on in their union, they would often clash as a result of their strong personalities and competitive streaks. Their competitive nature fueled their bickering, which occasionally spilled over into public settings. One such instance, as detailed in Burt's biography, An American Life by Kate Buford, left a shocking mark on their relationship. It was 1954, and the duo had just pulled up to a fan event. While there, Berg and Kirk found themselves at the center of attention, entertaining the crowd with their trademark banter. However, Burt, always quick-witted and bold, decided to take a different approach to either elicit a response out of the audience or simply make fun of his co-star. So he aimed at Kirk's height, a known sore spot for the star. At 5'7", Kirk stood significantly shorter than Burt, who towered at 6'2". To drive the point home, Burt publicly joked about Kirk wearing lifts in his shoes to appear taller. The latter didn't like that at all, and what began as playful teasing soon crossed a line. In front of a packed crowd, Burt's remarks hit a nerve, causing Kirk's composure to falter. Struggling to keep his emotions in check, he broke into tears before quickly pulling himself together and leaving the event. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for the actor, who later admitted his height had always been a sensitive issue. Although their relationship remained rocky for years after that incident, time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. The duo continued to collaborate and, over time, developed a deep, if occasionally turbulent, friendship. Their interactions were often peppered with barbed humor, a signature aspect of their bond that would last until their last breaths. An everlasting friendship. Beneath the teasing and bravado was a genuine affection that endured for decades. Their partnership on the set of Gunfight at the OK Corral provided one of the most heartwarming glimpses into their relationship. Kirk recalled a particularly memorable moment in his memoir when the two couldn't stop laughing during a scene. We go out on the porch and Burt says to me, "Thanks, Doc." I was supposed to say, "Forget it." But when I came to forget it, the ridiculousness of the scene, our great bravery, our machismo, made us howl. We did the scene over and over, and it just made us laugh harder. Over 4 decades, Burt and Kirk collaborated on 7 films, beginning with 1948's I Walk Alone and concluding with 1986's Tough Guys. Their repertoire also included The Devil's Disciple in 1959, The List of Adrian Messenger in 1963, 7 Days in May the next year, and Victory at Entebbe in 1976. Each project showcased their undeniable chemistry and the playful rivalry that defined their relationship both on and off screen. In addition to their film work, the duo left a mark on the 30th Academy Awards in 1958 where they performed the comedic song It's Great Not to Be Nominated, written by Sammy Cahn and Jimmy Van Heusen. The performance was so acclaimed that they reprised the number at the following year's ceremony. The two actors also ventured into theater, appearing as elderly versions of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn in Bernard Sabbath's Boys in Autumn, which premiered in 1981 at San Francisco's Marines Memorial Theater. Burt fondly recalled their stage work during a press conference, sharing how preview audiences erupted into applause when they first appeared. "The thing of it is," he admitted, "and we're perfectly aware of it, they're cheering for Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster, not really for Tom and Huck." Unfortunately, their decades-long love-hate relationship would come to an end on October 20th, 1994, as Burt would pass away at the age of 80. His cause of death was a heart attack suffered in his home in Century City, California. At the time of Burt's passing, their friendship had already evolved into something tangible. Despite their many disagreements, Kirk mourned the loss of his dear friend deeply, describing it as the passing of a giant. Speaking on their bond in a 2017 interview, Kirk confessed, "I miss Burt Lancaster. We fought a lot, and I miss him a lot." Back in 2013, Kirk was all set to honor his longtime friend and frequent co-star at a special screening of their classic 1957 Western, Gunfight at the OK Corral. The event, part of UCLA Film and Television Archive's Burt Lancaster, a Centennial Celebration film series, took place on June 7, 2013, at the Billy Wilder Theater in Westwood. Directed by John Sturges, the film marked the second on-screen pairing of these Hollywood legends. Burt starred as Wyatt Earp, while Kirk played his iconic counterpart, Doc Holliday, a troubled alcoholic dentist and gunslinger battling tuberculosis. The cast also included Rhonda Fleming, Oscar winner Joe Van Fleet, and a young Dennis Hopper. The movie has since become a celebrated staple of the Western genre. Kirk would live a few more decades, passing away on February 5, 2020 at the ripe old age of 103 years old. He died peacefully at his home in Beverly Hills, California, surrounded by family. Although the cause of his death was not publicly disclosed, he had suffered a stroke in 1996 amid various health issues. Kirk once shared in an interview that he never thought he would live to 100, and for that, he was very grateful. But at least now, he got to reunite with his longtime best friend, whom he unfortunately had to live without for over 2 decades. It's difficult to explain the exact kind of relationship this duo had, but from what we can tell, theirs was a relationship marked by rivalry, humor, and mutual admiration. Although their clashes may have occasionally overshadowed their camaraderie, their friendship ultimately stood the test of time, proving that even the strongest personalities can forge an unbreakable bond. In the end, their bond transcended the teasing and rivalries. Despite their clashes, Kirk and Burt shared an unshakable connection, proving that even the most complex friendships can endure. And sometimes, those just might be the ones that matter most. What do you think about this duo's unlikely friendship? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you're notified whenever we upload a new video.